do it?
It's all we need. Yeah, let's do it.
It's all we need. I've got the Dodgers in the background, ready to go.
Nice.
How do we do this? Wow,
I
this
have
is
no
weird.
idea.
We've never done this before. It's very strange. Hey, everybody, welcome to a Tuesday episode. Look at that. We're doing another Tuesday episode. How exciting. Dan, what's up?
I'm good, Jack. I'm good. We've just gotten off the back of having a great conversation with Bobby
Wagner. Yeah. Bobby Wagner of Tipping Pitches. Yeah, how are we going to do this? Bobby Wagner of Tipping Pitches. If you don't know Tipping Pitches, it's a very awesome socialist baseball podcast, which we love around here, folks. And we talked to him about basically about those two things, about the socialism and about the baseball here on this monumentous day, which is game 162 of the regular season. We talked about collective bargaining agreements. We talked about unions. We talked about minor leaguers not getting paid. We talked about predictions for the World Series.
You can explain something to me. I was a bit, as a novice, or as someone who doesn't know anything about baseball, I was a bit unsure about how, what the relationship was between the collective bargaining agreement and why. Was it just that when it runs out, then there won't be any? It will be indicative of the owners refusing to negotiate with the Players Association unless some agreement is reset.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much.
Why is that going to lead to strike action or the possibility of a strike in Major League Baseball? When it's currently not a possibility. Yeah,
I mean, there are things that the Players Association wants, right? The Players Union, that they want to get changed in baseball. And there are things that the owners want. They want to make more money. And the players also, want to make more money as well, right? But the difference is that, like, the things, obvious, this is just basic labor negotiation stuff, is the things that the owners want is they want to be able to exploit their players more, and they want to make more money off of, TV deals, et cetera, et cetera. And basically, like, their interests are pretty opposed at certain points. And if, the collective bargaining agreement only lasts for a set amount of years, and when it expires, they just have to renegotiate. So when we talk about, like, there could be a strike, that's just because the players won't get what they want, basically. But in reality, what that means is that the strike is coming from the owner's side, because the owners are actually withholding whatever work they do, basically, to just not have sports.
So basically, the previous collective bargaining agreement has set the relationship between the Players Association and the owners for the past 6 years, was it? And now it's expiring. There is no relationship until a new one can be struck. Exactly, yeah, because they have to have an agreement between the owners and the union, and it's looking, wow, that was pretty dismal. You'll hear in a bit, dear listener, what Bobby has to say about if the collective bargaining agreement is going to, if they're going to let it expire or not, and if there will be baseball next year, but it's pretty grim. So, what do you think? Do you think that was worth listening to as a socialist, just to hear, here's how the capitalism affects my daily life? I think so. I think it was great. I think it was a great conversation. I'll say to the listener now, like, I'm mostly in the background of this, not asking anything. This is Jack's episode in a lot of ways. Jack's
moral support.
Talk about baseball, and I'm keen to listen to people talk about baseball. So I was basically a listener to this conversation, and as a listener, I thought it was very enjoyable and thrilling, and I learned a lot. So
very exciting. I
hope everybody else enjoys it as well. I do pitch in a little bit later on with some beginner questions, but
he'll jump out at you.
He'll
scare you.
It was good. I'm really pleased, and our immense gratitude to Bobby for coming and doing it, because he didn't have to, and we appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Go check out Tipping Pitches. It's a great podcast if you like baseball and you're kind of sick of the typical, we're old men and we like baseball and those people play it the wrong way because they're Cubans kind of attitude that is so pervasive in baseball. And it's cool to hear baseball and socialism be mentioned in the same breath. So hopefully our listeners will like this one. It's a bit different to what we usually do, but still important nonetheless. So without further ado, go listen to Tipping Pitches, Bobby and Alex. And in the meantime, here's our interview.
Biggest pitch of the year here for the Mariners. 3-2, bases loaded. Cishek, the pitch. Base hit, left field. Here comes JP. Bauer scores. JP scores. Mitch Haniger.
All right, I think we're going here. In theory, we should just be going. Before we start, can you tell whose bobblehead this is up here? Don't know if you can from very far away.
I can't, although it looks a little bit like it has a mask on it.
It does not have a mask on it. It has a very large beard. He was a Dodger for 1 year. Do you know who that is? This is your trivia for the night.
No, I don't.
It is the beard. It was Brian Wilson. It is the only bobblehead that I own.
So I was going to ask that. He was actually a Dodger for a year? I think of him only as a Giant.
Yeah, I think understandably. He was a Dodger for 1 year. We paid him $10 million and he got hurt. And it was like, he pitched against the Giants for one game and everyone was like, well, that was worth it. And then he got hurt. And it was just like, oh, there's his career.
At least the Dodgers can afford that $10 million.
Yeah. That's it. You know what? Honestly, everyone's talking about how like the Dodgers are the evil empire now. But you know what? At least they're spending money. Honestly.
Yeah.
Like, I get it, but at least they're the only ones spending money. I feel like, okay.
Alex and I
I'm just going to say,
talked ourselves into the Yankees a couple times because of that exact reason.
Okay, well, that's a little dangerous. I'll be honest. That's a little dangerous.
I know.
I think the real evil empire. You're the Mets fan, right?
Yeah.
You're not the A's fan? Okay. I kind of feel like the real evil empires are like the A's and maybe the Tampa Bay Rays of the world. But you know,
yeah, we just did a whole rant about the Rays actually on the episode that we just recorded that's coming out tomorrow.
I respect that. I like that. Well, speaking of your show, do you want to give our nerdy, portly, Marxist, beautiful listeners kind of just a little intro to what your show's about, to tipping pitches and who you are, and kind of just about a little bit about the show?
Yeah, I'd love to. Tipping Pitches is a baseball podcast, ostensibly, but also we talk a lot about socio-political issues, labor issues within the wider world of baseball. It didn't start out that way. I think that it started out mostly, with the ethos that we wanted to do a show that seemed fun, because a lot of the baseball shows that we were hearing seemed like, whether they were, mired in statistics or whether they were like mired in more of the old-timey, like play the game the right way kind of ethos. Like we just wanted to do something that was like fun, centered around the pop cultural aspects of the game. So over time, it's blended to be a little bit more about labor issues, socio-political issues. But I think that it still maintains that like intersection of pop culture that we really care about as baseball fans that make us love the game so much. We do it once a week, so we're not like obligated to react to stuff when it happens in real time or like do breaking news episodes or anything like that. So it gives us a little bit more creative freedom to talk about the stuff that matters the most to us. And it just so happens that over the last couple of years that has become more and more labor oriented. But I think that it was sort of a natural growth. Like we didn't set out with the intention for the show to become that way. But baseball is one of those sports where labor issues and socio-political issues come up so often because it has so much, history with those subjects.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I mean, like, that's kind of one thing I wanted to ask you right off the bat is I feel like your average person would perhaps hear that you're doing a podcast about like, or even just talking about like labor relations in Major League Sports and kind of be like, who cares? Like all of these people are like trillionaires and, they're
right.
all like, I think, they're all like, they've got it made. So why would we care? So, I mean, could you talk a little bit about like why it is actually important and maybe like why we do need to care?
Yeah, for sure. Well, first I will say that elevator pitch sounds awfully boring, but I think that Alex and I make it fun. We crack a lot.
It's a great show. It's a great show.
We're very sarcastic. It's lighthearted, even though we cover a lot of heavier, more complicated topics. But I think that that's a really good question. It's a really hard question to answer, Jack, because we have found ourselves often trying to avoid the millionaires versus billionaires question, but it is the way that so many fans filter their understanding of labor relations. Is like, why should I care? There's a bunch of spoiled millionaire players who want XYZ, and then there's a bunch of billionaire owners who don't even seem like real people in society because they're not. But I think that something that Michael Bauman, who is a coworker of mine at The Ringer, I'm also a podcast producer there, but he's a coworker of mine at The Ringer. We brought him on at the beginning of 2020 to do an annual State of Labor in Baseball podcast. And something that he said, which has really resonated with me when people ask this question or when this question comes up on the show, is it's kind of like what your boss is doing to you, just on a larger scale.
Yeah,
throw out all the numbers and you want to talk about it in terms of fractionality, in terms of proportions, it's very similar to what bosses try to do throughout all industries. And then that's not even to say anything of the fact that like minor leaguers are actually being exploited on the level of gig workers and, you know, certain service workers and hospitality workers. Like these guys are actually being paid below minimum wage in a lot of cases, or right at minimum wage for only 5 months out of the year. So though these issues seem a little bit high concept at times when we're like getting into the nitty gritty of a CBA, I do think that the underlying themes that we try to approach these conversations with are at least relatable for someone like me who is in a union, or for someone else who might be considering trying to get into a union or start a union. And so if you can get over the fact that it is a small subsect of workers, baseball players in America, they're not exactly like us, but if you can get over that fact, you can start to see a lot of similar themes, and start to relate it to the real world, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, I think you hit on two pretty important things. One, which is like, it is just labor relations, and it's the same thing. Like, there is literally no reason for owners to exist in baseball. Like, obviously, under capitalism, it is kind of a bit of a necessity, I suppose, but it's like in, you know, reality, there's no reason for these people to exist, and we give them too much credit. But I think you hit on the kind of more important thing that I'd like to talk about, which is the minor leagues. So could you speak a little bit to kind of how the minor league system is set up in Major League Baseball, kind of why it's a little bit more exploitative than something like the NBA, and kind of what it's like just being a minor leaguer in today's system?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, why it's more exploitative. So the minor league system works a little bit different in baseball because it was founded in the 1940s and 50s by a guy named Branch Rickey, who's like a famous baseball executive, or at least he was the one that popularized it within Major League Baseball. It basically exists as a feeder system to the Major League club. So if you draft someone or you sign someone before they can make their debut, because the competition level is so high and the learning curve is so steep in baseball, they send you to different levels, whether that be single A, high A, double A, triple A. And all of these minor league teams exist as independent financial operations. So the clubs themselves are not owned by the Major League Baseball teams. Now, the MLB teams license their player contracts out to go to these minor league towns and play for these minor league clubs, but only because they need these teams for development purposes. They need somewhere for their players to go play actual baseball and face competition and, you know, ostensibly get better. And they staff all of the coaching, they staff all of the players, but they don't staff any of the like operations of the minor league clubs. So that is the disparate landscape that we're working with. There's like a bunch of different businesses who have different interests and everything that make up the minor league ecosystem, that make up the minor league economy. You know, the life of a minor leaguer is that it's exactly that. You get drafted by a major league team, you achieve your dream, or you get signed by a major league team, you've achieved this lifelong goal, and then they send you, when you're 18, 19, 20, whatever age you happen to be when you get signed, they send you to a kind of random town throughout anywhere in the United States. And if you're not a guy that was drafted really highly, you very often don't get a very big signing bonus. You might get as little as $10,000, and then you might be paid as little as $8,000 for 5 months of work, and then no money for the rest of the year. So,
yeah, well, let me just pause on that for a sec real quick, because you say it's like for 5 months of work, but it's also like, you know, you're expected to maintain your body and your shape,
right,
to be at like, you know, a world-class level for the entire year, right? It's not like you just,
exactly.
Oh, right, no, I'll go back to like my day job or whatever for the other, you know, however many months, you know, so.
And I think that there's a lot of, you know, there's just momentum from how they've done things for so long. Like, it didn't used to be a 365-day a year requirement for you if you were a minor leaguer in order to develop. But now it is, because we know so much more about athletic development. We know so much more about training. And so they're asking these people to work for entire years, and they just can't afford it if they're only being paid for 5 months out of those years, which is what the uniform player contract, which is what dictates labor relations at the minor league level, The uniform player contract says you only have to pay, $500 a week to these guys, and you have their rights for 7 years after you draft them, and they're exempt from antitrust laws, so they can collude with each other to keep salaries down. It's a whole myriad of things. It's like a very complicated web that they have built, but all in all, there's a lot of momentum against these minor leaguers. So the average, I encourage people to read a lot of the reporting that has come out in the last year or so, or the last 18 months or so, about the experience of being a minor leaguer and about making this little money and being sent to a new city, trying to find housing when you can't even really get approved for a lease, making so little and not proving that you've been making it for the entirety of the year if you're going to sign a 12-month lease or whatever. So yeah, I feel like I've gone on a long diatribe and might not have answered all of your questions, but for the specific question of how it's different than other leagues, I think that something that you have to understand about baseball is that it takes guys longer to get to the top level. So in basketball, you might go to the G League, which is their development league. You might go for a year. Or in your rookie year, you might just be on the team and you might be the best player. That's just the nature of basketball development. Guys affect it at a younger age. And in baseball, it can take 3, 4, 5 years to get up to speed, literally, in order to be called up to the major league team.
Yeah, and you hear all the horror stories about like guys, like who've been in the minor league circuit forever, and they kind of get messed around by the owners of like the actual major league teams for when they're going to get called up, and you hear horror stories about them, like having to stay in a room with like 5 other guys and like sleep in that room, and like or sleep in their cars, or like the food that you can afford is just like crappy fast food, and it's not really helping you like stay in shape or anything. But It's interesting because like you kind of find this pervasive mindset, I think, among like major league players, which is changing, I think, with guys like McCutchen and others, I suppose. But like you kind of find this attitude that's really similar to like Wall Street bro attitude, which is like, hey man, you just got to grind. If you want to make it to the show, you just got to grind, bro. And you just got to like get through that like horrible decade of your life and somehow survive, and or whatever. And it's like, man, that is such a poisonous, like, I don't want to sound basic or whatever, but like such a poisonous like capitalist myth. It's like the only reason these people are grinding is because of the horrible system of the farm leagues, right? Like it has nothing to do with like, I heard you guys say something on your show about like, how many, I think you used the example of Jose Altuve, but I'll use a different example, say perhaps Mookie Betts. How many like Mookie Bettses have we lost just because like, they just couldn't hack it or they couldn't afford it, right? Yep. It's like, this has nothing to do with utility of like producing actual good players. It's just about exploiting the people so you can make enough money.
I think that's a really good point and something that we've talked about a lot. There's basically no proof that there's any correlation between having to grind and creating adversity and actually succeeding in the future. If that were the case, then, like Vlad Guerrero Jr. wouldn't be good because his dad was Vlad Guerrero Sr., who's a Hall of Famer, and he had a huge signing bonus and everything. But he's also the best hitter in baseball right now. Like, there's just they pick and choose examples. People who have that mindset, people who purport that mindset, pick and choose examples to prove why grinding is good. And the adversity of having to go to a different town, play against entirely different players in a different place at a different competition level than you've ever had to face in your entire life, that's adversity enough. And I personally think that there is a much more compelling argument on the flip side of that, which is if you provide these guys security, if you provide these guys housing, if you provide them livable wages, good food, good nutrition, that will ease some of the anxiety and stress and free them up to actually become better at baseball. Because so many guys, as a guy like Kieran Lovegrove, who's a minor leaguer in Houston with the Rocket City Trash Pandas, who has been, it's just an absurd name. I realize that not everybody's like used to these names, but that's the name of
it's the Trash Pandas, sir. Yeah, it's Rocket City.
Yes, it's the name of a minor league team associated with the Los Angeles Angels. But he has become sort of the face speaking out as a current minor league player for some of these issues. And one thing that I think is really striking about his story is that he struggled with a lot of mental health problems. And there's been plenty of research done about how, financial insecurity, housing insecurity can affect your mental health in adverse ways. And it's pretty easy to draw a line between minor leaguers having that same experience and then, really struggling mentally with not just how good they are on the field, but also just how they're progressing through their early 20s, which is a really hard time to be living your life and entering the workforce. And it's obviously not like the rest of us, but it is sort of characterized by all of these same societal and capitalistic forces.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I heard you guys too talking about, this might have been a while ago now, but it was the kind of controversy. I hate that this is even controversy, but like where there were a couple of minor leaguers who were wearing, and even major leaguers, I suppose, who were wearing wristbands to show their solidarity of like, hey, things could be a lot better. We're kind of being exploited like a lot, and we're making all these people a lot of money. It would be really nice to get paid a living wage. That would be really cool. And that somehow turned into a controversy. Could you speak a little bit to that and like why that was controversial?
Yeah. So I think I don't know, to understand this, we have to go back a little bit. There has not really ever been outward displays of solidarity from minor leaguers in terms of trying to fix conditions up until the last couple of years. Excuse me. And one of the driving forces for that is an advocacy group called Advocates for Minor Leaguers, who is a group of people who are trying to change the conditions or bring awareness to conditions. It was founded by a bunch of former minor leaguers who lived this experience. And what they do basically is they help players understand, what the experience is going to be like, so they have realistic expectations. And then also they talk to players and they share their experiences. And when those experiences are incredibly awful, as they often are, they share that so that the public and the fans can put pressure on these major league teams to treat the minor leaguers better. They have grown a lot in the last year or so. In the pandemic, they've done a lot of, honestly, like investigative reporting into how major league teams have been treating their minor leaguers with regards to COVID safety, with regards to healthcare, with regards to housing, and a lot of different things. And so they organized a protest. Not really even just like I don't even want to say protest, because it's not like the players were refusing to play, or it's not like they walked out of the training room or anything like that. It was literally just they wore wristbands like Live Strong style that said fair ball to bring awareness to fans who might have been attending that game, or to any media who was covering that game, about how they felt that they were being treated wrongly at the minor league level. These working conditions were just untenable. So Advocates for Minor Leaguers organized that protest in a minor league game between a Mets affiliate and a Phillies affiliate. And then it came out, what you're referencing, Jack, it came out a couple weeks later, or about a week later, that Phillies coaches and executives sat the team down and said, hey, this is not the right way to do this. And they deny that they disciplined these players, but I mean, we've all been in meetings where like they say that they're not disciplining you, but they're really like they're elbowing you a little bit.
But you'll be fired.
Wink. Yes, exactly. And minor leaguers, something that they really struggle with is job security too, because they know that they can be cut for any reason. They're not big earners. They don't have any protection against being cut. And it's really hard once you get into the slipstream of getting cut from one team, one organization. You get a reputation for a guy that gets cut a lot, doesn't want to hang around. And then, or the team doesn't want them around for whatever reason, even if that's an incorrect characterization. It can really change the trajectory of your career. So guys are truly terrified to speak out, and these minor leaguers did. And of course, the Phillies immediately tried to shut it down, because the longer you let a fire like this grow and burn and get more oxygen in the media, people talking about it, not just people like me and Alex, but in larger. Me and Alex on Tipping Pitches, my co-host, who had to be absent today because he's attending game 162 for the Yankees.
Is he actually? Oh my God! When you were, yeah,
he is.
Oh,
He's
right.
an
That's
A's fan. He's
understandable.
an A's fan, but he got an opportunity to go and see, and the Yankees might have an epic meltdown. So it'd be cool.
Oh my God! One can only hope.
But not just people like me and Alex talking about it, but places like ESPN, places like The Athletic, adding oxygen to this fire and adding gasoline to this fire in some cases. And I think the Phillies have a lot to lose. Every team has a lot to lose. The more awareness that there is of these teams, like, and how they're treating their minor leaguers, the more public sentiment will just continue to move away from management, which, as you know, makes management very uncomfortable because they realize that this is a losing battle for them. They realize that no public opinion is never going to be in their favor if all of the facts are laid out on the table. I mean, they are literally colluding against some of the most vulnerable workers in their entire labor landscape in the Supreme Court to get antitrust exemptions so that they can continue to pay them less and less and less. And no matter what PR spin they put on it, they know that the more people know, the more minor leaguers are vocal, the more we're headed towards a world where minor leaguers can talk about these things openly, which gives them a better chance to organize and unionize. And the more we're headed towards the world where basically every fan is like, this is unacceptable. You should not be doing this. Because every fan that I know who knows about the conditions, and granted, this is my own social circle of like lefty people, but even people who are not like me who care about these issues, the more people know about this, it's basically 100% disapproval of how MLB teams handle the minor leagues.
Yeah, and I mean, like, you can literally talk to anyone, and if you show them exactly what you're saying, if you show them how these people are actually treated, they'll be like, yeah, that is bad. Owners have a lot of money. People doing labor have no money. That's bad.
And when you tell them, specifically when you tell people how much money it would cost to fix this, it would cost like $10 million to pay everybody in the minor league system $50,000 a year, which is like 10 times what they're making now, and not even that much money compared to how much labor value they have towards the entire system of baseball in America, but would be enough for them to, eat and feed their families and pay off student loan, whatever it might be. And $10 million to an owner is nothing. It's a rounding error. It's a reliever that you sign. It's Brian Wilson.
It's literally Brian Wilson in the last year of his career.
So it's just so obvious, and I understand why the Phillies immediately reprimanded their players. I was a little surprised at how quickly they did it because the story was like still out there in the ether. And if you deny, it's a little bit sort of like a, wow, thou doth protest a little too much. What's going on here? It like piques the investigative journalist's interest and that kind of thing. But, I think teams and owners are very afraid if their minor leaguers organize,
of course,
speaking collectively, as all owners of all companies that employ workers are.
Exactly. And I mean, the owners are not creating much value. I'll say that. Yeah. So you brought up that kind of like more people are starting to talk about the minor leaguers and stuff, and you are starting to see some like real legacy media types talking about it, if for no other reason than that it's like the hot new thing at the end of the season or whatever. Do you see kind of like a sea change coming? Like, I know that your guys' kind of tagline is, unionize the minors, unionize the minor leagues. Is that like, how far-fetched is that? Like, because obviously there's a players association, a union in Major League Baseball for the top level guys, the guys actually in the show. Stunning that there isn't one in the minor leagues. Do you see that ever happening?
It will happen. It will definitely happen. As long as like the heat death of the universe doesn't come first, but I'm not qualified to talk about that. It will absolutely happen in the same way that there will be a lot of fights over unionization at Amazon. Like it's only a matter of time because the conditions are so exploitative that they necessitate it. I just think that it's a very uphill battle, and it's just going to happen in the public. Like just because it's being talked about more and more, and just because more places are writing about it, advocating for it in some cases, it doesn't mean necessarily that it's like imminent, because it's a very hard, from a practical perspective, it's a very hard organizational challenge because these guys are at different levels. They are employed by different teams. They're in different states, in different cities, in very small cities. They are I think the biggest challenge is that they're only at a certain place playing with guys for like a month at a time sometimes. So if you have like 5 guys in a minor league clubhouse who are, let's say a de facto organizing committee for what might become the minor league baseball union, all the people that they're recruiting might get promoted to AA next week. And so,
and who's to say that the owners wouldn't just do that intentionally, right? It's like, oh, this guy's causing trouble, let's just trade him to the Great Lakes Loons or whatever.
Yeah, or just cut him entirely, because there's nothing that says really that you can't cut him. I mean, you're obviously not allowed to fire people for, union activity in America, but it's not like the Labor Relations Board has ever really come down on the side of workers in a meaningful way for a while now. And so that's a little bit harsh, but you know what I mean? It's not like they're going to go out of their way. If the owners basically come up with a bullshit excuse as to why they cut a player, even if it was because they were organizing, if there's no paper trail of them doing that, there's no way to prove it, because guys get cut all the time, every day, and for any reason. Even if they're playing well, they can get cut. They can just be cut because there's not enough space on the roster, and they want to bring in a new person, and they think that person has a better chance to succeed at the major league level or fill an organizational need or whatever. So, to your question of, do I see this happening? Yes, absolutely. There will come a day when there will be a vote for a union in the minor leagues. Do I think it's close? No, because infrastructurally, there's just a lot that needs to happen before then, and there needs to be some sort of outside body that is helping advance that, because from within the ranks, it's just very hard for it to grow organically, and for players to both focus on improving as a baseball player, which is a very hard thing to do, and also improving their working conditions. It's frankly just too much to ask players to do all at once. And so it's just going to take a lot of time to, I think, lay a foundation for all of the housekeeping stuff that comes with trying to form a union, for lack of a better phrase.
Well, I almost wonder if it's got to come then from like the actual major league guys, like they've all been through it. You know what I mean? Like they all know how crummy it is. It kind of sucks that you would have to rely on like empathy, but at the same time, it's like, I don't know. They're I don't know. It will come down to somebody withholding their labor. I guess just depends on who it is.
Right. So I'm less optimistic for the MLBPA striking in order to support minor leaguers, because they're not members of that union. So there's not as much of a legal defense. There's not as much of a historical precedent in the labor fight between the MLB and the MLBPA for the MLBPA to be striking over something that they're doing to non-union members. Like that's never happened before, and so much of labor and CBA negotiations is about precedent. So they really would have to strike and say, include these minor leaguers in the next round of CBA negotiations, and that strike could last a year, could last 2 years. The owners really don't want this, so it could require them giving a lot. And so I do almost think that the path, at least from where it looks like now, is minor leaguers to create their own union, and for major leaguers to basically stand in solidarity with them, stand in their defense. And whether it's like they're basically like sister unions, the way that like the Writers Guild has an East and a West, and they're not exactly the same, but they are, they do stand up for each other on similar issues. Like whether it functions like that, I'm not really sure, because there's no precedent for any of this stuff, but it would be so hard for the Major League Baseball Players Association to add those minor leaguers in, just because of what we talked about at the beginning of this conversation about minor leaguers, how much owners don't want this. And CBA negotiations at this point are basically just about sussing out how much the other side wants something and how much you're going to have to give in return to get that thing.
Yeah, no, for sure. So, I mean, I guess that kind of brings us in to the like looming horrible thing that nobody wants to talk about, which is coming up at the end of this year, which is the end of the collective bargaining agreement between the Players Association and I suppose just Major League Baseball or the owners, or I'm not exactly sure how to phrase it, but nobody's talking about it because it's really it's been an awesome year for baseball and really cool things are happening. And today is like the most insane day of baseball I can remember. But like, what's going to happen? Like, are we going to have baseball next year, or is it just going to get shut down?
Man, I don't know. I asked Alex this last week on the show. I was like, we've talked about it every, like 6 or so weeks. We just do a check-in with how we feel about the upcoming offseason and the CBA negotiations and, what we're kind of expecting to happen. So I asked Alex to go on the record about it last week. I was like, do you think there will be a work stoppage? And he was like, I think that there will be, if the parameters for that are, will they have a new CBA by the December 1st deadline? I think that's almost definitely no. I think that they will either extend the terms of the current CBA for 3 months and try to get it done before the start of the next season so that no baseball games get missed, or whether they will just be operating without a CBA because there's no games being played, so it doesn't matter quite as much. I don't think that they will get it done before December 1st. I think that there's basically like a less than 1% chance that will happen.
Sick. Awesome.
So we are heading into not uncharted territory because there have been multiple work stoppages in baseball just because of the nature of the fight between the players and the owners. I go back and forth on this all the time because on one hand, the owners have it made, and so they have no reason to jeopardize that, that history of making so much money in the last 2 decades. They have no reason to jeopardize goodwill. They have no reason to complain about how much money they've been able to make and how much their franchise values have gone up and all of these benefits that they have just by nature of having had enough money to buy into this antitrust exempt industry. But at the same time, I mean, they continue to ask for more and more, and they just continue to try and undermine the Players Association. And so the real issue has been that in the last 2-3 years, there has been a lot of confrontation over free agent spending, and they are trying to solve that problem, mainly trying to solve a problem where players get paid not very much for the first 6 years of their career relative to their value because the teams own their contract for those first 6 years, so they can decide what to pay them with certain parameters, but they can decide what to pay them basically. And then they are free agents after that point, and they can shop themselves out to other teams to get deals with no limit on those deals. It can be as much money as they can possibly negotiate for. But over the last 5, 6, 7, 10 years, those free agent deals have been drying up, more or less, for lack of a better phrase. And the bigger stars still get their big contracts, but the kind of middle tier of 30-year-old MLB star does not get as much money as they used to because owners are wising up to how players don't perform as well post 30, and they're just refusing to give that money out. And so the Players Association is trying to solve for that problem in that they're not making a lot of money earlier in their career, and now owners are saying, we don't want to give you a lot of money later in your career, and they're saying, hey, what the hell? We have no opportunity to actually recoup our value as workers in this industry that you're telling us is like free market capitalism, but certainly doesn't feel that way. It feels like we're being colluded against. And so they're trying to solve that. And that's a really big existential question to solve. There are a few things that the owners want in exchange for something that would be more favorable to the players, like expanded playoffs, meaning more teams make the playoffs, meaning more TV revenue for the playoffs, which is bad for competition, bad for fans. But I can see players being like, well, if it makes us more money. And these are these existential forces that affect the game just by nature of the fact that owners are there leeching off of it, which is why Alex and I have advocated many times to just nationalize the game, just have the municipalities claim eminent domain over all of the teams, and then open up the books, elect different control people, open up the books, and then players can still make their revenue or whatever the same as they always were, but the owners would not be a factor in that equation anymore. That would be standing as an impediment to actually enjoying the sport. But obviously, politically speaking, we are very far away from anything like that.
It's right around the corner. Nationalizing baseball's right around the corner. I can feel it. I mean, that brings me into
first, and then nationalizing the MLB teams. Next.
No, all or nothing. That brings me into something that I'm interested in terms of like what can actually be done now, right? And when I say now, I kind of mean like under capitalism, right? Like what can be done to make the sport better, more enjoyable, like under capitalism. And I mean, it is so insane that the commissioner is just an employee of the owners. Like that is so, like, it's insane that owners exist. It's insane even more so that the person running the league is just like their bosses are the owners and not the players. It's like, here's a crazy thought, guys. What about if the commissioner was elected by the MLBPA? Or like, hey, what about the fans? What about that? That would be really cool. I know that like the owners would like scuttle the ship before that happened, but like there's something cool. There's no need. I feel like I didn't even know that like the commissioner was just an employee of the owners for a long time. But I feel like that's just something people just don't really kind of realize. And so it's like, oh, when Manfred does all of this stupid stuff, when he shows up like drunk to give Corey Seager his MVP trophy, it's like he doesn't really care because like the players are gonna like hassle him. You know what I mean? It's like he was literally bought in just to, you know, deal with the upcoming CBA in the favor of the owners.
I think once your perspective on that is honed into focus and you realize that he's actually literally just an owner stooge, like he's literally employed by the owners and they would fire him if he did not do their exact bidding, I think that it's very clarifying because you start to understand. I mean, Rob Manfred, this is literally a guy who negotiated CBAs for the owners before he became the commissioner. That was his job. He was the ownership side labor lawyer in CBA negotiations, and he was really good at it. He won the owners very favorable terms, and they rewarded him with the commissioner role. And since then, you know, he talks about himself as like a technocrat. Basically, he's like the technocrat commissioner who wants to like make tweaks to the game that make it more efficient, make tweaks to the game that
like the zombie runner, which everybody loves.
Right. That make it more appealing to younger audiences, ostensibly. I don't know why we think that Rob Manfred is the guy who understands younger audiences versus like any of these players who are actually the ones appealing to younger audiences. That's a whole different conversation. But
the youths loved the corn game. Everybody loved the corn game.
Right. I thought it looked kind of cool, but that's a whole different.
It did, you know, okay, it did actually look cool, but the whole like, you know, it didn't need to come out of the corn.
Yeah, a manifestation of MLB not realizing that their demographic is actually old people, but also still playing to that same demographic. Like they didn't realize that young people didn't care about that. Is a long way of saying it. But yeah, I mean, you know, to your question of can we get a commissioner in here that will be better for labor relations? No, definitely not. We could get a commissioner who's better for on-field product, one that understands it better, one that will actually listen to and you know, embody the values of people who have played and loved the game their whole lives. Like to this question of does Rob Manfred actually love baseball? He talks about it all the time. He's like, I'm the biggest baseball fan in the entire world. I'm like, well, then why are you shitting all over the sport all of the time? That's a really weird thing to do if you're a big baseball fan. You know, a former player would be great. We've advocated a few times for someone like Curtis Granderson. We've advocated in the past, before I worked with him, for someone like CC Sabathia. Now I know he has absolutely zero interest in doing that. But, you know, someone like that. Ken Griffey Jr. is currently an advisor, a consultant for the commissioner's office for on-field play, for competition or something. So he basically makes recommendations as to how rule changes will affect the sport. I think things like that can improve on-field, but in terms of labor relations, the only way that it will get better and that owners will not continue to exploit it is to, you know, get rid of them via eminent domain.
Get rid of them. Okay. I understand.
Or, you know, more effectively organize the MLBPA. And I think we've seen a little bit of that in the last couple of years. The guys who have been here for a longer time, guys like Max Scherzer, guys like Colin McHugh, guys like Sean Doolittle, these guys understand the power of solidarity. They understand the messaging that is required to be such a public-facing union. Last year during the pandemic and when they were negotiating the terms to come back and play, it was very clear to anyone who was paying attention that the owners wanted to play as few games as possible because they were going to get paid the same from they were going to get paid the same amount of money from their TV contracts as long as they played 60 games or more, and which is hilarious. And they knew that it was going to, I guess, cost them more money to play more games with no fans in the stands, to actually like pay the workers to come and do that, even though it wasn't actually going to cost them anything close to something that would threaten their bottom line. Really, they were going to take a bigger hit during one calendar year when they've been making record profits for the last 15, and they didn't want to do it. And it was obvious to anyone paying attention that they were trying to play as few games as possible, which is shitty. That's a shitty thing to do, because then they wouldn't have to pay the players as much because the salaries are prorated to how many games that you actually play in a season. And fans really wanted to watch it. If they were going to be able to bring it back in a safe way, I think there was a lot of people out there who were like, it'd be nice to have sports as a distraction if you can do it in a safe way with the right testing and the right distancing and et cetera, et cetera. I still think they came back way too early, obviously, because the pandemic proved to last the entire year, and there was a lot of positive tests all the way up until Game 7 of the World Series. Game 6 of the
Just in
World
Turner.
Series. Right, exactly. And the players came out with messaging that was like, just tell us when and where. We'll be there.
Yeah.
We want to play. We will play 162 games if you just tell us when to show up. And that's really effective union messaging, because the public is like, cool, the players are ready. Why aren't we playing? Oh, the owners don't want to play. So I think stuff like that, and social media campaigns over things like salary arbitration, which is where the teams come in and tell you you're not worth any money at all. Here's what we're going to pay you. And then the players are like, actually, I think I'm worth this much. And then you have a neutral arbitrator decide how much the player should actually make.
It's the perfect system.
Right. That's the thing that actually happens. They've united over stuff like that in a more public way, using the benefits of things like online organizing, using the benefits of veterans who have very favorable opinions with fans as being the face of these things, in a way that I just think the Players Association was not interested in doing between the 95 strike, where they organized very effectively and got a lot of wins, and basically 2015, which is when the last CBA was negotiated. They've been losing a lot in negotiations since then, but in the last few years, I think they've really started to turn the tide around. Different societal factors change whether or not they'll be able to win at the bargaining table. There's a lot of big question marks about like what is the future of revenue when it comes to TV contracts and that kind of thing, and how much of that can the players get. But just in terms of like union hawkishness, it's gone up in the last couple of years, which frankly I think is a good thing for a fighting union like the MLBPA. Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I know we have game all of the games of 162 about to start here in a minute. Dan, did you have anything you want to ask? I know we're kind of just talking about baseball and that's about it.
Yes, as a British person, this is some total novice to this. I have no idea what's going on. It's been really thrilling to listen to you both chat about it, though. I hope it's not too disconcerting having me hanging out without saying anything.
No, not at all.
Maybe you could explain to me why today's series of baseball games is so exciting. Either of you.
Yeah, sure. So MLB has the lowest percentage of teams that actually make the playoffs of the entire crop of the total teams in the league versus other sports like basketball and football. Only 10 out of the 30 teams make it in Major League Baseball. That's 3 division winners and 4 wild card. 3 division winners in each league, and then 2 wild cards in each league. And so very often the races come down to the last day of the season for who will actually make the playoffs. So because there are so few spots, there are multiple teams vying for them, particularly in the American League side of the bracket. There are 4 teams vying for 2 wildcard spots. And basically what they do in game 162 out of 162 will dictate whether or not they get to play in the playoffs in a few days. So you play 6 months of a calendar season, you play almost every day, and it all comes down to one game.
I've said this before, but from my perspective, American sport does drama so much better than British sport seems to, kind of thing.
Yes, but in terms of fairness, I think that 38 games or 39 games they play in the Premier League, right? And then they relegate the bottom 3. That seems like the most fair in terms of competitiveness, and I think that it pushes teams to not want to be relegated. In American sports, we frequently have a problem with tanking and anti-competitiveness, and you've seen that really blow up in the last decade, and in a lot of ways that manifested as anti-labor. If you have 10 teams that are literally stating before the season we're not trying, then why would they go bid competitively for guys who are free agents? And then you start to see that's why some of the free agent market had dried up a little bit. You can draw a direct correlation, and maybe correlation isn't always causation, but I mean, to me, I think there's a pretty clear case that it is causation in this instance.
And is that worse in baseball than it is in other sports in the US? Because there is the franchise model kind of thing, and the lack of relegation is the case across American sports. But
yeah, I think I don't know, Jack. Do you think tanking is worse in baseball? I think it's probably the worst in basketball.
Yeah, but also like in a sport like basketball, you kind of just need to pay one guy, one superstar, and you can probably make the playoffs, right? Like in baseball, you can get the best player. You can get the 2 best players in baseball, in fact, and still suck. So I'm not that I'm talking about any team in specific here, but his other team.
I think the problem in baseball is slightly different than basketball. I think the basketball teams, they tank their way all the way to the bottom because if you get one superstar player at the top of the draft, you can change your whole franchise around, and I think that's a very enticing concept for general managers, guys who run these teams. I think in baseball the problem is a little bit more acute. I think it's that teams are either completely tanking for a few years so that they can keep salary down while they don't see a competitive window for themselves, or they're in a perpetual on the fence, and they keep their salary totals in the middle tier of the league, and then at the trade deadline they sell all of their best players away and then they tank. And so you don't get as many teams that are going all the way in competitively and spending up to the different luxury tax thresholds, and therefore creating more competition, creating more excitement for the fans. Because there's nothing more exciting than when your team says we're all in, we want to win the World Series this year, and there's almost no teams doing that anymore. Maybe 3 teams that do that on a year by year basis. And I think that is what's bad for the sport in terms of tanking. That you don't
yeah, go ahead. Yeah, sorry.
I was going to say that you don't get more teams who are just our chips are in the center of the table. Money be damned. We have plenty of money to afford these players, and let's just lay it all out there on the field and let the players decide it. I think so often there's a sort of there's a restrictor plate on the competition of these different teams, and they only want to spend, mediocre amounts of money comparatively to the rest of the league. Yeah.
And also the worst thing, conversely to kind of what you're saying, is when the players are we're all in, baby, we love it. And then they all get traded and the owners are we are not all in. We would like to see you all fail.
Yeah.
It's just oh, sick. Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I suppose before we go watch some baseball, do you have any predictions on what's going to happen tonight? What's going on? First of all, the most important thing is the NL West, of course. What do you think's happening there?
Wow, I would love a game 163 in the NL West.
Oh my God.
Basically,
could you imagine how horrible that would be for Giants fans when it's wow, you've had an incredible season and you've been able to carry it for 162 games, and then the effing Dodgers come back in. That'd be so good.
I'm on the record as anti-Giants.
Good.
Whether that just be because I talked to myself into that early in the season, or whether that be because I have something subliminal with them eliminating the Mets in 2016. I'm a bit of a psycho fan. I'm on the record as anti-Giants, so I would actually like them to lose, like the Dodgers to win, and for them to have to play a 1-game playoff in 163. But I don't know. In terms of other predictions, it's so hard. I don't even want to begin to predict the AL wildcard picture. My World Series pick, which I did on a show that we did a hit on a couple days ago. I picked a rematch of 2017 Dodgers Astros.
Oh no, I couldn't take that.
I mean, it's just gonna melt down baseball Twitter because these teams hate each other, and there's obviously so much bad blood over the sign stealing stuff. But in terms of drama, I'm all here for it, and I really actually think that those are the 2 best teams in their respective divisions. I think the AL has been pretty bad for the most part. I think the Rays are slightly overrated, but we don't need to get into each individual team. But I do think that the Astros are flying a bit under the radar. I think that they have the best lineup and the best offense in the entire AL side. And then the Dodgers are just, I think, far and away the best team, even though they're a game behind the Giants somehow. But in terms of their roster, in terms of their run differential, everything else on the advanced metric side of it, I just think that they're the best team. And so I always want to see the best team at least get a chance to win in the World Series. Now, when it gets to the World Series, I just root for the best games possible if I don't have a particular rooting interest. But I would like them to at least get there so that I can see all of the best players on the best team get the chance to show their mettle,
Yeah, absolutely. I would like to see the Dodgers make it, but I just feel I feel like they are going to have to go to the wild card, and I feel like St. Louis has been, I don't know, praying to Baphomet or something. I don't know what's going on down there, but
we say often about St. Louis devil magic, but this year has truly been some of the most devilly underworld magic of any with what they've done. But I also would like them to get eliminated hastily.
That'd be good. That'd be very good
for them. Yeah.
So I would say I'd like to see the Dodgers make it, and that would be ideal, obviously. But I feel like we're gonna get the most boring matchup possible, which is San Francisco and the Rays. And it's just going to kind of be like, all right, well, I kind of don't really want either of these teams to win.
Yeah.
So
there's a real let them fight.
yeah, exactly.
Don't really know who I'd be rooting for in that instance. Although I think I have more to lose if the Rays win a World Series, because I have been vocally against their ability to win the World Series because they refuse to spend. I mean, they're in the bottom 5 of payroll every year, and somehow still put a winning product on the field, which is a testament to their player development and their player scouting. But at least for me, it's more of an indictment of the fact that they refuse to spend more and go over the top and put a team on the field that will definitely compete for a World Series, definitely have the ability to beat the Dodgers once they get there. I think that they were just outclassed by the fact that the Dodgers had way more players who they chose to pay more money in the World Series last year in 2020. Like, I think that was truly the difference. And so I don't think that I could stomach it if the Rays win the World Series.
It would add to the Wander Franco lore. That's
true.
For sure, but that would be
true.
About
winning it in his rookie year. Yeah.
That would just be stupid.
Yeah. He's a wonderful player. So much fun to watch.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess we'll see what happens tonight. I'm going to be on the edge of my seat. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. I guess I don't really have anything else. We can bury the hatchet and say that I apologize. I think about this a lot, honestly, whenever the playoffs come up. Apologize for Ruben Tejada. I think that was pretty messed up. I think that was pretty bad. I think about that a lot. Because I always like the Mets, and then it's always like, but Mets fans probably don't like me. So
yeah, it's okay. It's okay. The Dodgers Mets is not like a serious rivalry anymore. It truly was more Mets versus Chase Utley. I don't think that anybody carried over any like bad blood to the Dodgers in general. It helped that the Mets went on to win that series. I think if the Mets went on to lose that series, it would have been potentially more controversial in the future. But I don't have any bad blood towards the Dodgers. In fact, I frequently go to Dodger Stadium and root for them.
Excellent. And you pay $35 for a beer, I'm sure.
You do. It's actually $20. 20 real
Is it actually
dollars for one beer? Yep.
Oh my God.
$17.75 plus tax.
Jesus. All right. Well, I think there's one more thing I just wanted to say, which is that for our listeners, like, we really wanted to talk to Bobby, I guess, just because this is like a real concrete example of how capitalism like really affects all of our daily lives and how it makes the sports bad. And things are probably not really going to change until we, I think, get rid of capitalism. Like, I hate to say it, but like, this isn't really a problem of like Rob Manfred is such a jerk, or like if we could just replace Rob Manfred, or if we could just get some better owners. There's no reason for owners. There's no reason to produce for exchange. We need to get past it. The only reason I want socialism is so we can have good baseball. I think that's all I wanted to say.
That's a good tagline for our podcast. Maybe we should start using that. No, thank you for having me. This has been fun to talk about some
of course, and where can people find you?
Themes more directly. Yeah, you can find us anywhere you get podcasts. It's Tipping Pitches. You can find us on Twitter at tipping_pitches, where we tweet a lot about anti-capitalist stuff, but we also just tweet funny baseball stuff. So you can follow the Twitter account without listening to the podcast, but I strongly encourage that you give it a shot, because like I said at the beginning when I was giving my elevator pitch for it, it's not, it's not really like academic the way that we talk about this stuff. We do try to crack as many jokes as possible. We do try to keep it lighthearted and accessible for all people who maybe agree with a lot of these things, but don't quite think about them that often. I think that is sort of the listener that we're aiming for. So yeah, Tipping Pitches on anywhere you get podcasts, tipping_pitches on Twitter. And you can buy, we talked a lot about Unionize the Miners. We have merch that we sell in different baseball inspired logos that says Unionize the Miners, and all of those proceeds go to a 501c3 nonprofit called More Than Baseball. And those guys, who are wonderful, we've loved partnering up with them, and they've been really generous in coming on our podcast and about talking about the work that they do. But More Than Baseball, they basically put together stipends and resources for minor leaguers who need money for housing, money for food, money to support their families, and they're able to redirect some of those funds. So you asked me earlier, what can we do that isn't just to get rid of capitalism? This is like direct action, direct support kind of stuff. So in the interim, we're trying to do the best we can. So you can buy Unionize the Miners merch, and the proceeds from those will go to More Than Baseball, which will make, donations at the end of every month that we do, that we sell.
And they're sick shirts. They're awesome.
You can also buy a hat that I'm wearing right now that says "No Billionaires in Baseball," which is just
That's sick.
just so people know, just so people know your stance. I wore this from the Dodger Stadium last night, just so people know I don't want any billionaires in baseball, including the Dodgers billionaires. Even though they spent, we can still get rid of them.
Yeah. You didn't get anyone who was like, I like the billionaires in baseball, actually.
No. I guess I'm just not that approachable, I guess people don't want to come up to me and argue about socialism during this 7th inning stretch. But I look forward to the day that someone does want to have that dialogue.
It's coming soon.
Thanks, guys.
Cool hope. All right, cool. Well, thank you so much, man. And like we said, check out Tipping Pitches. And good luck, man. We'll see you around. Check. Hey, everybody. Sorry my audio sounded like shit on that one. What are you going to do? You live and you learn. The music that you heard this episode, of course, one and only King Giz and the Liz Wiz. The song is called Music to Eat Bananas To. Go check it out on their Bandcamp. kinggizzard.bandcamp.com. They rock. Thanks again to Bobby for coming on. Once again, go check out Tipping Pitches. It rocks. It's one of my favorite podcasts. Go buy a shirt, a Unionize the Miners shirt, or even better, a No Billionaires in Baseball hat. It all rocks. It's all great. Goes to a great cause. Yeah, I think that's about it. Let's go Dodgers. Am I right? Am I right, folks?